to our neighbors to the north. We'll be looking at a turn of events that is a bit unpalatable in Zimbabwe. There was a disturbing fire that engulfed the offices of the Southern African Political Economy Serious Trust, or SAPIS for short, in Harare, just hours before a major press conference by opposition and civic society actors. The incident has sparked serious concern that this is not merely an act of arson, but part of a pattern of, let's say, intimidation of dissenting voices in Zim. And with us today from Zimbabwe is the General Secretary of Zimbabwe's Communist Party and a grassroots activist who'll be helping us unpack what's really happening in Zimbabwe. Ngqabutho Nicholas Mabhena, he will be helping us get a bit more insight on what is really happening in Zimbabwe. Is there an effort to try and silence those who are dissenting against the status quo, against the government of the day? And he's joining us via our virtual platform. Ngqabutho Mabhena, always a pleasure having you on air. Really appreciate you giving us your time.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for you to have me, and greetings to your viewers.
No, the pleasure's all ours. To begin with, could you maybe just briefly walk us through what exactly happened, the timing of that fire, the venue in itself, and who was supposed to meet there, and how this has played out so far?
What we know is that this is a clear message by the regime in Zimbabwe that it will not accept any alternative views. As you rightly said, it was the venue for the press conference, which should have been held yesterday on the 28th at 11 a.m. Shortly after midnight, around 1 a.m. or so thereabout, then there was that fire, not only at the premises of the venue, but also another comrade's home was petrol bombed. Is an activist. So when we woke up in the morning, then there's this fire that has destroyed the premises where the press conference was going to happen. We then thought that the comrades were going to continue with the press conference outside the premises or at the place where the fire actually took place. But as you would saw the videos, the police did block the press conference, not only in Harare. There was another press conference in Bulawayo. In Bulawayo, of course, there was no fire, but to physically block the organizers of the press conference, and the press conference did not happen. So it is very clear that it is a well-coordinated thing. The fire itself was coordinated. The blocking of the two press conferences was well-coordinated by the state machinery in Zimbabwe.
Is this a normal thing? Is this a status quo where those are seemingly in opposition to the status quo, to the government of the day in Zimbabwe right now, often go silent, they get intimidated, and actions like this, like as you mentioned, a house petrol bombed of one of the activists. How frequent are these cases?
This, we saw it happening during the days of the movement for democratic change, and even before the MDC, you know, the atrocities in Matabeleland and a part of Midlands. We know how, particularly in 1990, Zimbabwe Unity Movement, which was led by the late Edgar Dekere, was treated. We know the shooting of the late Patrick Kombai in Gweru in the build-up of the 1990 elections. So it has been the modus operandi by the regime. It fears the unity of the people of Zimbabwe. They thought post-2023 elections, through the parliamentary and council records, they thought that they'd contained the opposition, that infiltrated and won over the opposition. Now, when they see other forces outside your mainstream opposition beginning to come together to build this movement, which is anti the 2030 agenda, not only anti the 2030 agenda, that speaks of democracy in Zimbabwe, to say we cannot continue with this. We cannot continue when the looting class is in power. The looting class continues to loot our minerals, our resources, the Reserve Bank, and so forth. So when these forces then come together, the regime gets threatened, hence the actions that they took yesterday.
Mm. One thing for me is the fact that Zimbabwe's ruling party at this current moment, ZANU-PF, is seemingly under some pressure over proposals to extend President Emmerson Mnangagwa's term beyond 2028. Could this event be linked to the broader struggle over constitutional rule, power transitions, and just the space for a lively opposition?
What happened is that you will know that in 1979, 1980, we adopted the Lancaster House Constitution, which we called it a ceasefire document. It did not have term limits. Of course, there were amendments to that constitution until we adopted a homegrown constitution in 2013, which clearly puts two-term limits for a president, and that in any event, there's an amendment to the constitution after we have gone through the referendum, that extension should not benefit the incumbent. In other words, even if you were to amend the constitution, remove the term limits, it should not benefit the sitting president. So what they are now trying to do is to bypass that. Hence, this the 23rd agenda to keep Emmerson Mnangagwa in power, because we know through the two elections that Mnangagwa contested as president that he was struggling to get 50+1% for him to be confirmed as the president of Zimbabwe. He's a man who's not popular in the country. He was brought in by the military. So he knows that he will not win a free and fair election. And he knows that in 2028 he cannot stand as a presidential candidate. Hence, this is what they are doing. And because Emmerson Mnangagwa is one of the ministers who was there in 1980. He was the Minister of State Intelligence. He's fingered to have played a major role in the genocide. He feels that if he's out of power, just like Mugabe, who thought feared being held before the courts. So the thinking is that he might be held before the courts. So he wants to stay there until his demise.
And just finally, before I let you go, Mr. Mabhena, for our listeners in South Africa, across the SADC region, who are listening right now, why should they care about this incident in Harare? What precedent is being set, and what are some of the key lessons that can be drawn from just the broader region's democratic health?
We are always accused, as you would know, that we are cowards. We do not want to go back to Zimbabwe to mobilize. This is clear that we are not dealing with a normal government in Zimbabwe. We are dealing with a brutal state. It will do anything to stay in power. What we need from South Africans and the broader progressive forces is solidarity. We are inspired by the statement by COSATU in solidarity with the workers in Zimbabwe, which was written to the Zimbabwe Congress of Trade Unions. We know that the South African Communist Party might release a statement as part of their solidarity as well. We know that the Botswana National Front might release a statement, and the other forces, because we are mobilizing international support, progressive international support, to say what is happening in Zimbabwe should not be allowed, because the negative effect of what is happening is that you suspend any plans to rebuild the economy. The end result is the massive migration, mainly to South Africa, and we know what migration to South Africa then brings in terms of violence and so forth. So we call on the African National Congress, the government of South Africa, the SADC region, to ensure that elections in Zimbabwe are held in accordance, firstly, with the provisions of the Zimbabwean constitution, secondly, in accordance with the SADC protocols on holding free and fair elections.
Well, there you have it. Ngqabutho Nicholas Mabhena, General Secretary of Zimbabwe Communist Party. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure chatting to you.
The pleasure is mine.
There you have it. Yeah, I think a very, very concerning state of affairs in Zimbabwe. Fire at the Safest Trust building. And as we've heard, there's not necessarily a single event. It's always been the modus operandi of ZANU-PF when it comes to dealing with dissenting voices, those that don't agree with this current political party, how it goes about running the country, amending the constitution. And I think it's very, very important for us to continue educating ourselves about Zimbabwe, especially as South Africans. Very close neighbors of ours. Whatever's happening in Zimbabwe, ultimately will feel the effects of it. So I think very, very important. We're going to take a quick break. We're not done yet. We'll be back with you after this.